There is a force within you that precedes language, that existed before your name was spoken, before you learned to say, I. It moves through your body, like water through stone, carving channels you never consciously designed. We might call it desire. We might call it instinct. But these words are already too small, too domesticated for what it truly is. Carl Jung understood this. He saw that beneath the polished surface of our civilized selves, beneath the masks we wear for others and the stories we tell ourselves, there pulses something older than consciousness itself. He called it the collective unconscious, that vast reservoir of ancestral memory and primordial impulse that connects you not just to your personal history, but to the history of the species, to the raw hunger of life itself seeking continuation, seeking expression, seeking release. When we speak of doing it, we speak not merely of a physical act, but of something far more profound. We speak of the life force asserting itself against the walls of repression. We speak of eros in its purest form, that creative surge that drives not only the body toward union, but the soul toward wholeness. This is not merely sexual desire, though sexuality is one of its most potent expressions. This is the fundamental yes that life says to itself, the impulse toward growth, toward merger, toward the dissolution of boundaries that separate self from other, self from self. The question is not whether this force exists within you. It does. It has existed in every human who has ever drawn breath. The question is what you do with it, how you relate to it, whether you acknowledge its presence or pretend it does not exist at all. And here is where the modern dilemma begins. We have built a world of extraordinary complexity, a civilization of rules and roles and carefully calibrated behaviors. We have learned to delay gratification, to channel our energies into socially acceptable forms, to wear the persona that society demands. This is not entirely wrong. This is, in fact, necessary. The raw expression of every impulse would make community impossible, would reduce us to chaos. Jung knew this too. He understood that consciousness itself requires the capacity to say no to certain urges, to transmute them into something else. But there is a difference between transformation and denial, between integration and repression. And it is in this difference that your survival, your psychological survival, hangs in the balance. The impulse to do it, whatever form it takes in your particular life, is not your enemy. It is not a demon to be exorcised or a weakness to be overcome. It is energy, pure energy. And energy, Jung taught us, can never be destroyed. It can only be transformed. When you refuse to transform it consciously, it transforms itself unconsciously. And what the unconscious does with denied energy is rarely gentle, rarely kind. So we arrive at the real question, the one that echoes beneath the surface of this inquiry. How long can you survive without acknowledging this force? How long can you pretend it does not exist, that you are only your public face, only your civilized self, only the role you play? The answer, Jung would tell you, is not as long as you think. And the cost of finding out may be higher than you are willing to pay. Imagine a room inside yourself that you have never entered, a door you walk past every day, pretending not to notice it. Behind that door lives everything you have refused to claim as your own, every desire you have labeled as shameful, every impulse you have deemed unacceptable, every hunger you have starved into silence. This is the shadow, and the shadow does not die from neglect. It grows. Jung spent decades mapping the terrain of the unconscious, and what he discovered was both terrifying and liberating. He discovered that whatever we deny in ourselves does not disappear. It descends. It sinks below the threshold of awareness and takes up residence in the dark, where it ferments, where it gathers force, where it waits. When you refuse to do it, when you suppress the primal urge without understanding it, without integrating it, something remarkable happens. The energy that would have been spent in conscious expression or conscious transformation begins to leak out in other ways. You become irritable without knowing why. You find yourself obsessed with judging others for the very behaviors you have forbidden yourself. You dream strange dreams, violent dreams, erotic dreams that leave you unsettled in the morning light. You develop symptoms, psychosomatic pains, mysterious ailments that no doctor can quite explain. This is not punishment. This is communication. The shadow is trying to speak to you in the only language it knows, the language of symbol and symptom, the language of the body and the dream. There is a particular kind of hunger that comes from denying desire. It is not the clean hunger of fasting, which has purpose and end. It is a hunger that hollows you out from the inside, that makes you restless and resentful, that turns you bitter toward those who seem to move through life with more ease, more joy, more permission to be fully human. You may not even recognize this hunger as related to what you have repressed. You may simply feel that life has grown gray, that meaning has drained away, that you are going through motions without understanding why. Jung called this loss of libido, but he meant something deeper than sexual energy. He meant the loss of life, force itself, the dimming of the inner light that makes existence feel worth living. When you repress too much, when you deny too much, you do not become pure or holy or transcendent. You become depleted. You become a ghost in your own life. And here is the cruel irony. The more you repress, the more you must repress. Because the shadow, once fed by denial, begins to grow autonomous. It develops its own personality, its own agenda. It begins to act on your behalf, without your conscious consent. You find yourself doing things you swore you would never do. You find yourself in situations you cannot explain. You sabotage your own relationships, your own success, your own happiness, and you do not know why. This is the shadow at work. This is the return of the repressed, that fundamental law of the psyche that Jung understood so well. Whatever you refuse to face in yourself will eventually face you, and it will choose the moment. It will not ask permission. There is a silence that settles over a life too carefully controlled, a life where every impulse has been judged and found wanting, where every spontaneous movement has been censored before it could emerge. This silence is not peace. It is the silence of a battlefield after all the soldiers have died. Nothing moves, nothing grows, and in that silence you survive. Yes, but you do not live. How long can you survive this way? Years, perhaps. Decades, even. The human capacity for endurance is extraordinary, but survival is not the same as thriving. And the question is not whether you can endure the absence of doing it, the absence of authentic desire expressed or consciously transformed. The question is whether you can endure the presence of who you become when you deny it too long. When the shadow grows so large, it begins to eclipse the light of consciousness itself. Jung would tell you that the shadow is not your enemy. It is your ignored brother, your disowned sister, the parts of yourself you were taught to hate. And hatred, turned inward, becomes depression. Denial, sustained too long, becomes neurosis. The energy of life, blocked from its natural channels, finds darker ones, narrower ones, ones that hurt you and those around you in ways you never intended. This is not a moral judgment. This is simply how the psyche works. This is the architecture of the soul. But there is another way. There has always been another way. Integration. The word sounds simple, almost clinical, but what it describes is nothing less than the most profound work a human being can undertake. The work of becoming whole. Jung did not teach indulgence. This is crucial to understand. He did not say that every impulse should be acted upon, that every desire should be fulfilled in the external world. He said something far more radical, far more demanding. He said that every impulse must be acknowledged, Every desire must be brought into the light of consciousness, must be seen, understood, and then, only then, transformed. When you acknowledge the primal urge, when you stop pretending it does not exist, something remarkable happens. The urgency begins to shift. The compulsion loses its grip, because what the shadow wants, more than anything, is not to be acted out. It wants to be witnessed. It wants to be integrated into the wholeness of who you are. This is the great secret that Jung offered the world. You do not overcome the darkness by fighting it. You overcome it by including it, by bringing it into relationship with consciousness, by allowing the light and the dark to dance together in the vast space of your awareness. What does this look like in practice? It means you sit with the desire instead of fleeing from it. You feel its texture, its temperature, its pull. You ask it questions. What are you? What do you want? What are you trying to tell me? And you listen, not with the intention of obeying, but with the intention of understanding. Because desire, when truly examined, is rarely what it first appears to be. The urge to do it is often not about the act itself, but about what the act represents. Connection, aliveness, the dissolution of loneliness, the affirmation of your own existence, power, beauty, transcendence. These are the true hungers beneath the surface hunger. And these, unlike the raw impulse, can be met in many ways, can be channeled into creativity, into relationship, into work that matters, into art that speaks, into presence that transforms. This is what Jung meant by the transcendent function, the miraculous capacity of the psyche to take opposing forces, desire and discipline, impulse and intention, shadow and light, and create something new, something that honors both without being enslaved to either. When you learn to do this, when you learn to hold the tension between what you want and what you choose, between who you are and who you are becoming, you discover something unexpected. You discover that the energy you were spending on repression, on maintaining the wall between acceptable and unacceptable, becomes available for life itself. You become more creative, more present, more genuinely connected to others. Because you are no longer afraid of what they might see in you. You have already seen it yourself. You have already made peace with it. So how long can you survive without doing it? The answer is not measured in days or years, but in depth. The question was always about wholeness, about becoming real. And in that becoming, in that courageous meeting with everything you are, you find not permission to act on every impulse, but something far greater, the freedom to choose consciously, to live authentically, to transform desire's raw energy into the refined gold of a life fully lived. This is Jung's gift. This is the invitation that never expires. This is the work that makes us human.